Hello and welcome to another 5-minute tech tip. This will probably be a little longer than 5 minutes. Pretty important stuff here because we're going to be talking about the proper uses and abuses of PowerPoint, but also known as really the how do we have good design in our decks, essentially, right? What's going to be sort of the best way to communicate what we're talking about? So I put together this slideshow on some kind of before and after things. So what is good design? That's always the question here. What are we talking about? Just remember, first of all, with design, it's a story. Design isn't always something visual, all right, as much as it is sort of like connecting all of your elements, right, to make sure that they're all cohesive there. So make sure that you stay in line with your story. You have a story arc, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And your story also should be cohesive in terms of your colors and your fonts and your shapes, and consistent in terms of hierarchy, in terms of placement, things like that. So it kind of feels like it's cohesive, right? We're all part of the same sort of thematic thing. So we're going to talk about what that looks like. So what are some initial considerations? We want to think about our audience, we want to think about the environment, and we want to think about, again, what is our message? Who is your audience? It's going to be a little different for, let's say, doctors versus lawyers versus seniors versus kids versus people who are already familiar with the content. We want to think about that. When you're presenting, is it going to be something that's going to be standalone that people are going to watch on their computers? Or is it going to be, you're going to be in an auditorium someplace giving this presentation? Is it going to be a rally of some kind? Okay, and your message is very key. Okay, so what is your message? Think about that from the beginning. What are you trying to say? Okay, what is my primary message? What is my number one goal in delivering the message? And how do I best visualize this message? Okay, and that's a big part of what we're going to be talking about. Okay, is visualizing it. Okay, but the first two parts are really important to really staying on that message all throughout, to stay consistent with that story. All right, so quickly we're going to go over what are the principles of design. Okay, 10 principles of design, blah, blah, blah. You see all that there. And notice how I just X'd out the 1 through 10. Essentially, we don't want to show our design as numbers like that. Okay, but these are still important to understand contrast, emphasis, etc. But we don't want to show it that way. Okay, so I just kind of did this to make a point, ironically, maybe you didn't get it, that we don't want to show our things that way. Here's other ways that we can show it. Contrast, alignment, repetition, proximity, and notice how I'm doing it with just kind of like different levels of layout and an alignment of how we're showing these things. Even a little bit of contrast. Looking at the hierarchy of how my titles are nice and big. Okay, and there's some consistency across the board with all that. Mostly monochromatic, working with shapes and things like that. So let's go a little bit deeper into these things. Good design is crap. That's your takeaway. Contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity. Your content should have these things. That is good crap in action. Okay, our contrast, our repetition, our alignment, and our proximity. Instead of showing bullets, our agenda is going to look like this. Okay, a much more interesting way of showing all of our stuff there. Okay, so we have our little bit of graphics there. We have numbers. We also have colors, right, to provide the contrast. Some things are bigger than others. Look at the title up on top. That also draws some attention to itself. Some other things to consider: lines, colors, shape, size, the spacing away from things. Okay, adding some texture. We want to have visual interest. We want people to be able to sort of have a motion around, but also in terms of their brains, all different parts of the brain, the right brain and the left brain, to be attracted to it. So adding on color can provide contrast to things. Adding on lines can add on, different kind of alignments, right? So you're basically saying that this is separated from that, but maybe the line might look a little bit different. Shapes are a very important way to organize your content as well, to maybe encapsulate things, to frame things. Spacing, obviously, they're going to be different from each other. Size also for hierarchy. So check out those things. Here's an example of hierarchy. Okay, looking at all these things, right? There's 8 possible ways to add visual hierarchy to your design. Certainly watch this and study it. Okay, this is going to be quick and dirty. I want you to really kind of just take away what some of these things are. All right, before you give a presentation, what are some of these things? Okay, having contrast between things, size to register importance, to communicate differences between things, the hierarchy in things. All right, grouping things separate from each other. All right. So really study these, try them. I'm going to give you some examples in just a little bit. Our agenda slide, just looking at this, we have colors, we have shapes, okay, we have things that are repeating across the board, okay, we have proximity and lack of proximity across the board. All right, here's another way we could have easily made this into bullets, but notice our lines and shapes are communicating things in different ways. Colors are communicating things in different ways. A little more visually interesting, a little bit more sort of whimsical. Right? Here's other ways. If you need to have more content in there, I understand that. So you might need to have your text there, but also understand that you can have a lot of different content on the same slide while still not making it busy. All right, so you can see we have shapes, and notice how there's consistency with the shapes and the icons across the board. Notice consistency with the titles, and also notice there's space in between all of these things, okay? And the monochromatic way is definitely a more contemporary way of showing your content. Here's another way. I'll just kind of go through these. Take them or leave them, right? Different ways you can be doing these things, okay? Just again, looking at colors, right? One title has a contrast between the different colors. It still works. They don't have to be so perfect across the board. We still want to have a little bit of visual interest. Our eyes really enjoy that. Okay, looking at a few more examples. Okay, looking at a before and after. The one on the left, not so bad. Okay, but then notice how we add on a few other things, make it a little more interesting and possibly even easier to read. Okay, we understand that there's a difference between, you know, each individual item on the agenda on the right-hand side. It's a lot bigger. We also have these icons that set them apart. We've got color. Okay, we've got that nice spacing across the board, and look at how the word agenda, right, go crazy, right, make things kind of shift the orientation a little bit. Okay, so a little bit bigger so you can see that. All right, you can see also before and after. Make a good slide, go from that to something that looks like that. Okay, here's another way you could be looking at things. This is working with smart art. Okay, here's some other ways you can show this. Okay, also working with smart art, but also adding in some graphics. We'll talk about smart art with PowerPoint in just a second. But just really be experimental, be creative, and then once you find your kind of groove and design, you'll be able to recreate the same thing just by using, you know, different text in there. But notice how I have my shapes, I have some color, I have my proximity, I have repetition all throughout. Okay, it really communicates kind of the difference in it. And I would also recommend animating these, not like crazy animation, I mean like pacing them out, where you have one by one by one each of these coming out, because this could be a little bit dizzying and overwhelming for people. Another way you can show things, feel free to just, you know, borrow some of these ideas. Another ways, right? Numbers are really important, right? When we're communicating sales numbers, this is going to be really important, right? To really kind of like make your numbers really jump out. Okay, so here is a beginning, middle, and end to how we can do our PowerPoint. So we start off with this, we go to another one, right, where we're just basically transforming it. We go to here, whoa, even better, same exact text, added some images, separated out by columns rather than bullets. Okay, here's another one, before and after. Look at that. Wow, super easy to do. Okay, and then check out some other resources if you want to learn more about how we can work with just working with good slides. And this doesn't have to be just with PowerPoint, by the way. If you're working with Keynote, if you're working with Google Present, I think, remember that's what it's called. I've been using it for a while. Lots and lots of great ways to communicate your stuff without having to rely on bullets. So take these notes, practice them. Certainly open to some suggestions if you want to have more tutorials on how to create these things in PowerPoint. How do we work with some of these shapes and text boxes? And the newer versions of PowerPoint actually gives you some of these icons. You can go to some other places like the Noun Project and Canva and Icon Finder to get some of those. Okay, so hopefully this was helpful for you. Please use these. It's really sad to see some of the great tools within PowerPoint just laid to waste. There's a lot of good features in there, but it's really up to you to use them and use them well. Okay, so again, I'm Dave Casuto with SF Tech Training, and this was a tech tip on PowerPoint and good design. Feel free to like and subscribe and share, and check out some of my other videos as well at SF Tech Training and 5-Minute Tech Tips. Talk to you soon. Be well.